Hi, I'm Dongshan. Welcome to Digging into China, where we explore China in depth to review unique perspectives. This year, an unusual situation has emerged. The Social Security contribution base in many Chinese provinces has been delayed. Typically, by mid-year, regions across the country announces the new Social Security base wage, which usually increases by a few percentage points annually. Over time, it's become clear that the rise in China's Social Security base far outpaces GDP growth. For instance, in Shanghai, the minimum wage is just 2,740 yuan, yet the Social Security base stands at 7,384 yuan. The stark disparity between these figures highlights the government's excessive demands, which are hard to ignore. This year, however, things are different. So far, only 5 provinces, Hebei, in Mongolia, Heilongjiang, Fujian, and Hunan have released their new Social Security bases. In Mongolia's base remained unchanged from last year. Hebei saw a slight decrease, while the other 3 provinces raised theirs significantly. Why then have the remaining provinces and cities delayed their announcements? In this episode, we'll explore the reasons behind these delays in depth. Why do local governments increase the Social Security base so aggressively each year? And what justification do they provide? Officially, the process is meant to be rational and evidence-based. By Chinese regulations, the Social Security base is tied to the previous year's average social wage in each region. If the average wage rises, so does the base. But how is this average wage calculated? It's a weighted average of wages from urban, non-private, and private sectors. For example, imagine a city with 5 million non-private sector workers earning an average of 120,000 yuan annually, and 10 million private sector workers earning 60,000 yuan annually. The formula would be 120,000 times 5 million plus 60,000 times 10 million divided by 15 million equals to 80,000 yuan per year. From this, an upper limit 300% of the base and a lower limit 60% of the base are set, resulting in a monthly Social Security contribution range of 4,000 yuan to 20,000 yuan. In practice, local governments have their statistics bureaus release the prior year's average wage data, followed by the Human Resource Department announcing the new base. Consider the 5 provinces that have published their bases this year. In Heilongjiang, for example, the 2024 average monthly social wage was reported as 7,570 yuan, leading to a new minimum contribution base of 4,542 yuan, an 8% increase from last year, far exceeding GDP growth. Given Heilongjiang's economic conditions, this average wage figure seems highly inflated. It's clear the local government is reluctant to relinquish the substantial revenue from Social Security tax. Likewise, Hunan and Fujian have raised their contribution bases this year, with increases that surpass GDP growth, reflecting a pattern of unchecked ambition by these governments. Hebei, however, stands out as the only province to lower its base, reporting a 2024 average wage drop of 151 yuan compared to the previous year, with the Social Security base adjusted downward accordingly. Hebei's government deserves some credit here. They could have manipulated the number to show a wage increase, but instead made a small concession to public welfare, foregoing additional revenue. The varying Social Security policies across regions reveal which local governments show even a hint of compassion. Zhejiang, for instance, calculates its minimum wage using data from 2 years prior rather than the previous year, resulting in a lower wage figure that reduces the Social Security burden on businesses and individuals. Similarly, Beijing and Fujian distinguish between enterprises and government institutions, setting a lower base for businesses and a higher one for public institutions, which typically have higher incomes. Averaging them together would inflate the base for those outside the public sector. So this approach eases some of the pressure on private sector workers. Looking at the recent trends, Shanghai's base rose by just 1% last year, a relatively restrained move. Generally, in China's more developed regions, local governments tend to be slightly less burdensome, though only marginally so, compared to other parts of the country. This might seem a little more reasonable, but it remains far from the standards of a truly equitable system. So why have local governments delayed their Social Security base announcements by 2 months this year? What are they hesitating about? The reasons are not hard to discern. First, real wages have likely declined, and while governments could fabricate the figures to justify raising the base, the public would see through it. Second, a recent Supreme Court ruling on Social Security has fueled widespread discontent, with many now resentful of mandatory contributions. Third, there is a limit to how much pressure people can endure. Excessive demands could drive citizens to protest, increasing costs for maintaining stability. Even without the protests, raising the base too high could backfire. Businesses unable to afford contributions might close, leading to unemployment and reduced government revenue. Alternatively, companies might avoid hiring full-time workers, especially young ones, opting instead for retirees or part-timers, further shrinking Social Security collections. Raising the base doesn't guarantee revenue. It must align with what people can realistically afford. On August 29, 5-1 Social Security, a third-party agency under Zhonghe Group, released the 2025 China Enterprise Social Security White Paper. It found that 61% of Chinese companies have labor costs exceeding 30% of their total costs, and only 34.1% fully comply with Social Security regulations. This underscores the immense burden Social Security places on businesses. Most companies in China seek ways to avoid contributions, and after all these years, only 1/3 comply faithfully. This points to a fundamentally flawed system, one that society rejects because it exceeds what businesses and workers can bear. This explains the intense backlash to the Supreme Court's push for mandatory contributions. It implies that 2/3 of Chinese companies could face lawsuits over Social Security compliance. How many will collapse under this pressure? To survive, some may exploit policy loopholes, hiring retirees, reducing full-time staff, or cutting wages. But how does this benefit China's economy? The exorbitant Social Security bases far exceeding minimum wages trace back to the real estate boom. Local governments driven by greed linked contributions to property purchases, reaping huge profits. To buy a home in a city, you had to pay Social Security for several years. When property prices soared, the people complied, as contributions could be offset by rising home values. Governments exploited this, raising bases year after year. Now, with the property prices falling, the bases remain sky high. Essentially, governments collected a massive tax in advance, but those funds have been spent. Even if they wanted to lower the basis to ease the burden, fiscal constraints make it difficult. This year, China's Audit Office exposed widespread mismanagement of Social Security funds. Nearly every province has misused or misappropriated these funds, dipping into them to cover salaries or debts. Nationwide, 40 billion yuan in pension funds have been diverted. Meanwhile, opportunists exploit the system. In Shanghai, a public sector worker, improperly employed since age 1, retired at 22 and illegally collected 690,000 yuan in pensions. In Heilongjiang, intermediaries and public officials defraud 150 million yuan through illicit enrollment. Recent 2024 audit reports from provinces reveal rampant illegal pension distributions, exposing the many unseen parasites draining these funds. Such abuses are nearly impossible to curb. A government overseeing itself is unlikely to be effective. If a poll asks Chinese citizens whether they support paying into Social Security, the approval rate would likely be very low. China's current social security challenges echo Japan's experience in the 1990s. After Japan's economic bubble burst, corporate profits fell, and the public willingness to pay into social security plummeted. Businesses cut full-time jobs and increased part-time roles, and with an aging population, Japan's social security system faced a massive deficit. The government eventually used fiscal funds to cover the shortfall, contributing to Japan's high public debt today. Japan didn't reach this solution easily. Initially, like China now, they tried mandatory contributions and delayed retirement, only to realize these measures were ineffective. They eventually turned to fiscal funds to support the system. Japan's missteps could have been a lesson for China, but the system has constrained China's economy. China supports a large number of retired public officials whose pensions rise annually. To protect their interests, the system sacrifices those outside it. In summary, the delays in announcing Social Security bases this year stem from the public's dwindling capacity to bear the burden. If governments continue raising bases recklessly, two outcomes are likely. 1. Public unrest could erupt. 2. Businesses might cut jobs, reduce wages, or hire only retirees or temps, leading to higher unemployment and reduced government revenue. Local governments face a dilemma. They recognize that the bases can't keep rising, but fiscal pressures and the deficits in social security funds make lowering them difficult. Japan's experience offers a clear solution. Governments must redirect funds from large infrastructure or tech projects to public welfare and challenge entrenched interests to make concessions. Only by prioritizing citizens can an economic recovery be achieved. Ultimately, a flawed system faces two fates: proactive reform or being forced into reform by public pressure. Without a reform, no system can endure indefinitely. Thank you so much for watching. If you find this video helpful, please like it, drop a comment below, and hit the subscribe button right here. It really helps YouTube suggest my video to others. I'll be back with more content soon. Until then, be well.